Thank you for staying with us. We had some problems with the devices. We have we have we have problems with some of our machinery or whatever it is, but we're glad you held on until we're back. We're not exactly sure where we stopped, but the family background of Ruth is what we were discussing. So we'll skip some of that. You can go to the book of Ruth. It's an interesting book to read and to know how she was used and how the plan of God was for her. Now, again, she was a Moabitess. She lived in Moab. There was the famine in Bethlehem, which was in Israel. And a man named Elimelech and his wife Naomi, and he had two sons, and those sons were it seems like from their early childhood, maybe, that they were young men who were not healthy. They were continual. As a matter of fact, their names really meant, the oldest name was same name means sickly, and the second was it just escaped me. Pining, and the second name was pining, and so they had a history. It sounds like of being ill. Well, when they moved to Moab to stay there until the famine was ended, Naomi's husband died, but Naomi's sons married women in Moab. So this Moabitess, this was beginning of trouble for her because she married a non-resident. She married someone who was not of their culture. So she married, and so her family became this new family, and now her husband, her father-in-law, and her brother-in-law die. And she's left in Moab with Naomi, two women who are trying to make things work, two widows. So now when you're talking about the background and we're talking about Ruth, these are the things you might want to consider. She married a stranger. She was childless and a widow in her youth. So she married, and before there were children, her husband died. Now, this may not be the way it was, but think about you have not chosen one of those in your land. You've not chosen that one of those. Now you're childless and you're a widow, and so you probably may be just a little bit of an outcast anyway where you're living now. But you had a family. You had Naomi, and you had your sister-in-law, and you had your brother-in-law. That was your family. Now you are a childless widow, and your mother-in-law is older. How do we take care of her? You're pressed to make strong against the grain decisions. You don't have anybody to help you make your decisions, but you have determined that you're going to try to do the right thing. And you're now, after your decision, you end up going back to Israel because the famine is over in Bethlehem. And so Naomi decides, I'm going back. Naomi says to you and to your sister-in-law, it may be best for you to stay here where you are. You may find another husband here. I'm going back to where it's home, where people know me. But you don't know anybody there. You're young. I'm too old to have any more sons. And if I had one, you'd be too old to marry them by the time they were at that age. Orpah, the sister-in-law, decides, the other one decides, I think I'll stay. And so Ruth says to her, I'm not. I'm going with you. Wherever you go, I'm going. I've made a commitment that I'm going to go with you. One of the verses we use often in weddings is, where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. And Ruth said, and where you die, I will die. She made that commitment. So So I want you to understand, this may sound noble, but this doesn't sound good for their future. So you're going to a place where you know nobody. Your family is not there. As a matter of fact, Naomi says to her, go back to your mother. But she refused. She went with her. And when she gets where she's going, then she starts to find some way of bringing in food for them. Now, and so she finds the law agreeable, the law of Israel being agreeable to that, because whenever they brought in their harvest, whatever they were not allowed to pass through the harvest more than once. So as they garnished from their produce, whatever was left after the first time, they were not to go back and do it again, because whatever was left was to be left for strangers, for people who were hungry, for people without, who could pass through and could eat from there. So she found a place, and she started to take care of Naomi. But the interesting thing was, after this, our next slide, please, is after these, here are her circumstances: no husband, no job, no family and friends, and no support system. And you're different there, and you're alone. But when Naomi gets back, the commitment of Ruth to her becomes the talk of the town, how this stranger has been so committed to Naomi. Naomi came from a family that apparently was pretty well known in Bethlehem. It was the news went around that Naomi's back home. Naomi said, "Don't call me Naomi anymore, because I went out full and I came back empty." So she changed that, she addressed them to change her name. So that's the background. And then Ruth goes in to start to work. A short journey to this longer story is that she ends up at in the field of one Boaz, and it says her hap was, that verse was, for her hap was to light on a part of the field belonging to Boaz. I want to tell you that there are things God has planned for you that just seem like it just happened, but it did not. It was planned. Boaz was one of the relatives or part of the heritage of Judah. And so the law was so that a kinsman doesn't lose his part of the heritage, that if he leaves a widow, then another member of the family then marries her. Another kinsperson marries the widow so that they can raise up children and it would continue their tribe. And so that's where she ends up. But when she's there, the story has gone about what kind of person she is. When she gets there, she follows behind them. The owner of the field comes from Bethlehem and sees them and asks who she is. And they say to him, she's the daughter-in-law of Naomi, and she's a near kinsman. And so he says to them, leave some on purpose for her. You see, you could only gather what was left. So leave some on purpose for her. He goes to her and he says to her, we admire you for what you're doing for Naomi. And he says to her, just glean in our fields. Don't go to the other fields. Just glean to our fields. Now, in our good old imagination, I imagine Ruth must have been nice looking, because she got his attention really quickly. He said to her, you don't have to glean anywhere else. Another significant verse was Ruth 2:10. I don't know if I wrote that scripture out for us. I'll read it to you. Just if you'll listen to this verse 2:10, because it's really important to go further. She says to him, she fell on her face and said to him, bowed herself to the ground, said to him, why have I found grace in your eyes, that you should take knowledge of me, seeing that I'm a stranger? Why? We have why questions. Why this? Why this happened to me? She fell on her face, bowed herself to the ground, and said to him, why? Why are you being kind to me? Why are you being going out of your way for me? Why are you giving me these opportunities that you didn't give to the others who are gleaning? That you should take knowledge of me, seeing I am a stranger. The answer to the why is because it was your hap. It was the plan of God for you. This field was made for you. This field, that's not what he said. He didn't know that. But the famine in Bethlehem was a cause for them to go to Moab, and a cause for her to come back. The death of them, they didn't die so she could come back, but she was the one that was chosen to come back. Do you understand what I'm saying to you about we don't know why we're here, but God does. We don't know what our future is, but God does. We don't know when we come to places where it seems like I don't know where to go next. You don't have to know where to go next. You just turn to him because he's made the plan, and we have to walk in it. Somebody says, well, how do I know how to walk in it? Well, a good answer is be still and know that he is God. It is he who has made us, and we not ourselves, and not we ourselves. We are not strangers to God, and he has not forgotten us wherever we are. He knows us. I shared with you not long ago, he hears you when you pray. He sees you even when you're not praying. He sees you. But he is so definite to God and so specific to God. He says, I know your name. He knew her name. These boys who were destined to die, the parents knew they were destined to die by their name. Sick and pining. Who names their children sick and pining? They were to last until they were adults. And Ruth was part of the destiny of Israel. I guess I don't know that we know, any of us know, but whose destiny is dependent upon your destiny? Whose life cannot happen until you happen? Whose way cannot be open until you come that way? I think that's important for us to understand, because we make so little of ourselves sometimes. Sometimes we make ourselves more than we are. But more than that, even those who make themselves more, it's because they think themselves less. And they need to do that. But who are we that God chooses us and that God has a plan for us? She says, why? And the answer is not given. The question is just being asked. We know the answer because you were chosen by God. So let's see what happens. By the way, she is her, he goes right away when she gets back home to Naomi and she sees what she's received and all of the great stuff. I mean, how much he's left on purpose. Where'd you get all of this? She tells him where the place was that she got it, whose property it was, whose field she had been in. And Naomi, we need Naomis. We need people who see beyond what we are. It's a wonderful thing to be able to speak into somebody else's life. it's a wonderful thing to observe things in people and let them know you observe them. Some things they don't know until you say, or sometimes they don't know how you feel. It is the proper use of prophecy is a wonderful thing for our lives because it gives us hope. It doesn't tell us what direction we've got to go in. It tells us the direction we're going to go in. And so our encouragement to one another, tell children what you see in them. Tell what you see. They're doing all the acting up. Don't make up something you don't see. Don't decide something you want them to be. But tell them when you see them being kind, or when you see them being a leader, or when you see them being quick, or when you see them stopping to help, or when you, whatever it is, when you see that they are tuned into what they do, their attention, when they can figure things out, when they can, they can run fast. God may be calling them to run fast, but always let them know everybody needs someone in their life to let them know that there's something beyond what they see. So she says to her, I know him. He's a Goel. He's your Goel. Remember this word. It's actually two words. He's your Goel. What is that? He's your kinsman redeemer. It means he has the right to redeem you, or he has the right to get you out of your circumstances. He has the right to marry you in that time. That's what it meant. It means he has the right to take you on as his own and to supply you with all the things you need. He has the right. He doesn't have to do that, but he has the right to do that. But she says to him, she says also to her, but from what I see and what he's done for you today, he already knows that he's your Goel, but he knows that that he's going to have to figure out what to do. So she says to him, she said, stay in the field in that field, follow his directions. And then finally she tells her, she says, I want you to use this so he'll know that you know who he is and that you're willing to be his wife. And so she follows the wisdom of her mother-in-law. And when she comes back to tell her what happened, the mother-in-law in her wisdom sounds like a mother-in-law to her mother. She says, he's not going to sleep tonight till he finds out who is between you and him. She says, I know, that just be still, because he's finding out what access he can have to make you his wife. And that becomes the end of all of the calamity for her. You see, I'm suggesting to you tonight that your change is ahead of you if you stay on the mark. That your circumstances may be dire, your marriage may be dire, your employment may be dire, your friends may have gone another direction. You may feel different and alone, but I want to decree and declare to you and inform you. I'm not prophesying to you. I'm telling you what is already. A change will come for you if you will stay. If you'll stay with God, he's got a Goel, a kinsman redeemer, someone already assigned to bring you into the place and we're not talking just about a husband. We're not talking, because I hope that he's talking to men and women, and we don't want any men to have husbands. No matter what your circumstances are, if you're in it, that means God's not finished with it. So whatever your present condition and situation, remember what he said. I know the plans. I don't need a plan for now. I'm already in it. I know the plans that I have for you, says the Lord. I know the plans, and they're good plans. What you living on? I'm living on a word. A good plan for you. And it's going to give you, if you hang on to that I have the plan, it's going to give you hope. And that hope will take you to your future. So in that small length of time, after all of those having to make a decision, after losing your husband, after being separated from your family and from your systems, and not being and feeling, where am I going where I have no part there? There's nothing there for me. I have no inheritance there. I am a Moabite. Everybody knows I'm a Moabite. I don't look like the rest of them. Nobody's interested in me. All of those things that the devil brings to us to tell us that our future is in jeopardy. Wonderful Jesus. But it's not. Your life is not in the hands of your circumstances. It's not. When you're going to do it, don't worry, just stay till he does. So the Goel, the kinsman redeemer, then becomes her answer. She marries him. He takes in Naomi as well, and they become a family. But that's not over. You see, God has plans for you that don't stop at you being taken care of. He has purpose and he has plan. It's not just about making you okay, glory to God. Sometimes God blesses you with abundance and you're thankful, but you don't realize that it's not your abundance. He blesses you because of whatever you went through to get the abundance, whatever it took to get the abundance. He blessed you because somebody else is dependent. The future is dependent upon the one you put something else in, the one you put you'll help, and the one you'll speak to. Sometimes a whole path of God is open by a word you speak to one individual, and you don't even know their name. You don't even know, you have no idea that you made a difference, but you had an assignment that you made. God, sometimes in your trouble, has assignments in your trouble. Sometimes you go through so you can understand how somebody else goes through, but also sometimes there's none of that. He just picked you and placed you because he's got a future that includes you. Now, let's go to our next slide, because I've gone further than I should have gone, I think. Who is Ruth? Because all the stuff is coming to an end because of her hap and because of her Goel. Next slide. What are your circumstances? The question is for you. What brought you to where you are today? And more interesting, or more important than what brought you to where you are today, is you are today. Who brought you where you are? Whatever the circumstances are, why are you not gone? Why didn't you lose it? Why didn't you leave? What brought you where you are today? And change it to the answer being, it's the who that brought me, and he's still bringing me. Let's go to our next slide. Then she fell to her face, bowed herself to the ground, said to him, why have I found grace in thine eyes? Because things are going to change. Why have I found grace in your eyes, that you should take knowledge of me, seeing that I'm a stranger? Because you are not a stranger to him. Because the place he brings you to is the place that was designed for you. Let's go to our next slide. Purpose is what drives us to the place of our inheritance. Our knowing that we have purpose is what keeps us from stopping. Knowing that where we are is not where we're going to have to stay. Knowing that drives us. I can be more. It drives us. I can do more. It drives us. It drives us. It is dissatisfaction with where we are because we can't have more. Purpose is what drives us. If we have no purpose, there is no need to continue. We continue because we are purposed. Our next slide. Ruth's story of her relationships with Naomi is a story of relationships. Her relationship with strangers who come to her country, and she marries one who is not part of her oikos, part of her world, somebody who is different. She loses him, and she may have even married him while he was ill. She loses him, and she's a widow at a young age. She's given so the relationship with him, the relationship with Naomi, and then relationship two, she has a relationship that she doesn't know about, to the greatest king Israel will ever have. She is attached to the very one who will change the tribal system to a kingdom system. She becomes the grandmother, the great grandmother of King David. She has a son whose name is Obed. Obed has a son whose name is Boaz. Boaz has a son, and his name is David. So her story, the beginning of it, looks awful. And if we stop in the middle, then it's just a sad story. But when we see that the end of her story was Jesus the Messiah, for the prophet have said that Jesus would come through the tribe of Judah. And then a promise that has not been made yet. A promise that's not been made. A promise is made to her great-grandson that says, and the Messiah will come through you, David. But there could not have been a David unless there was Ruth. So Ruth, or whatever your name is, sir, be careful of the relationships that God gives you, because there are greater ones that will come that are not relationships you have directly, but you touch so many other lives. Because of Ruth's choices, because of her determination to continue to live and be productive. Now, I want to say this right at this point. Boaz didn't come and find her, and she didn't go looking for Boaz. Some of us go looking for Boaz, and we end up that really wasn't his real name. You understand? But we go looking for things. God, do you know where she found him? At work. She was working. He found her. She was working. She was trying to do what she could to make ends meet, for herself and for Naomi. But he found her there. So the reason I'm saying that is because there's this little thing that goes around that says, you go find your Boaz. God never sent you to find a Boaz. He sent you to work, and Boaz will pay attention to you. God has the one for you, and whether it's a marriage, or whether it's a destiny in another area, whether it's a job, whether it's an assignment, be found working so that the assignment can find you in the work. So Naomi becomes, Ruth becomes the wife of Boaz. She becomes of Boaz. Is that correct? Yes. Of Boaz. She becomes the great grandmother of the king of Israel. So it says he wasn't the first king. He was the first king that God ordained. You see, the people wanted a king like the nations around them, is what they said. And David wasn't ready yet. So they wanted, while God is preparing them a king, they want a king like everybody else has. They get a king who is just like everybody else, and they suffer the consequences. But when King David comes, he comes in with the great-grandson of a Moabitess comes. They have a king who understands what love is, who understands what worship is, who understands who God is. There's no other writer in all of the Bible who writes like David about the character of God, about the mercy of God, the grace of God. Had there been no hard time for Ruth, there might not have been a king David. It may have been a king somebody else. The kind of man he was. let me tell you that many of us have great characteristics that came from those who came before us. We don't just have our daddy's gait and our mama's eyes and our grandma's hair. We have character that's built from them. We have personalities that come from them. So honor those who come before us, and then be willing to wait for God so he can get us in the place he wants us to be. Your Goel is there, your kinsman redeemer. And you know where I'm going. I'm sure you know where I'm going. Because now he calls us brethren. The Goel, our kinsman redeemer. He has become our brother. Jesus has become our brother to redeem us. He has brought us back to God. He's brought us back into the family of God. But somebody had to endure. And that was many, 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 many years before Jesus comes on the scene. But when we trace his history, it goes back to David, because the prophetic word had been that it would come through the line of David. It goes back from David